Here's something most people don't want to admit. You've probably read dozens of books in your life, but if I asked you to explain what you learned from them, you'd struggle to remember more than a few vague ideas. And it's not just you. Most adults assume reading more books makes them smarter, but the research tells a different story. It's not about how much you read, it's about how you read. The reason most people forget what they read or never finish books isn't because they're lazy or not smart enough. It's because somewhere along the way, we picked up habits that actually work against comprehension. We do things that feel productive, but mostly just waste our time. And the frustrating part, we keep doing them because nobody ever showed us a better way. Think about the last book you finished. How much of it can you actually recall? Maybe you highlighted a few passages, maybe lots of them, pages and pages of yellow text. Maybe you even took notes in the margin or kept a reading journal. Maybe you finished the whole thing in a weekend because you were motivated, you were focused, and you were really trying. And when you closed that book, you felt accomplished, you felt smarter, and you might have even told someone about it. But here's what happens next. A week goes by and someone asks you about the book, and you can remember the general vibe, maybe one or two interesting points, but the details, the arguments, the things that seemed so important when you were reading are gone. Or worse, you're 3 chapters into a book right now that you know is supposed to be good, that you paid money for, and that everyone says you should read, but you keep putting it down. You read a few pages, zone out, and realize you haven't absorbed anything. And you have to reread the same paragraph 2 to 3 times. So you start to think, maybe I'm just not a reader. Maybe my brain doesn't work that way. Maybe other people have some kind of focus or memory that I don't have. But that's not what's actually happening. What's happening is that you're making specific mistakes. Mistakes that feel like good reading habits, but are actually sabotaging your comprehension. And the thing is, these mistakes are so common and they feel so normal that most people don't even realize they're doing them. So I'm going to walk you through 6 of them. But here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to tell you to focus harder or just take better notes. That's useless advice. Instead, I'm going to show you what's actually breaking down in your brain when you read and how to fix it. These aren't reading tips. These are corrections to the process itself. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. So here's the first one. You're reading with your phone next to you, notifications are going off, you got tabs open on your computer, maybe the TV's on in the background or music's playing, or someone else is in the room. And you think, that's fine. I can tune it out. I'm still reading. But here's what you don't realize is happening. Every time something pulls your attention, even for a split second, your brain has to restart. Not just refocus, but actually restart. When you multitask, your brain doesn't actually process 2 things at once. It rapidly switches between them. And every time it switches, your working memory, the part of your brain that holds and processes information in the moment, drops significantly. What this creates is something called shallow processing. You're reading the words, your eyes are moving across the page, but your brain isn't actually thinking about what those words mean. It's just passing through. Think of it like trying to pour water into a glass with holes in it. The water goes in, but it leaks out just as fast. So what do you actually do about this? Create distraction-free reading sessions. 20-minute blocks where your phone is in another room, your computer is closed, and you're focused on one thing, the book. You wouldn't try to have a meaningful conversation while texting 3 other people. Reading requires the same focused attention. This is foundational. If you don't fix this first, nothing else will work because your brain isn't actually present for the reading. But even if you do fix your focus, even if you sit down, eliminate all distractions, and give the book your full attention, there's still a problem because most people think that's enough, and it's not. Here's what happens next. You're reading along, fully focused now, and whenever something seems important, you highlight it. Maybe you're using a physical highlighter, or maybe you're just doing it in Kindle. Doesn't matter. By the end of the chapter, you've got a full page of highlighted text, and you feel productive. You feel like you're capturing the important stuff, but you didn't actually engage with any of it. Highlighting is what researchers call passive encoding. You're marking the information, but you're not processing it. You're not actually thinking about it. You're just tagging it for later. And studies, particularly work by cognitive psychologist John Dunlosky, show that this creates something called the illusion of competence. You feel like you're learning because you're doing something, but your brain isn't forming the connections needed for retention. Painting words doesn't make them stick. So what should you do instead? After you highlight something, stop, pause, and force yourself to do one of 2 things. Either summarize what you just read out loud or explain it like you're teaching it to someone else. For example, if I'm reading about cognitive load theory and I highlight a sentence, I don't just move on. I stop and say, okay, so this is saying my brain has limited capacity, and if I overload it with too much at once, nothing sticks. That's it, 10 seconds. But that active engagement is what creates memory. Now you're not just reading, you're thinking. And that's the difference. Okay, so now you're focused, you're engaging, and you're actually thinking about what you're reading. But there's another problem, and this one is more subtle. You either pick books that are way over your head because you think they'll make you smarter, or you stick to books that are so easy they don't challenge you at all. And here's what happens in both cases. Your brain disengages. If a book is too hard, your brain gets overwhelmed. You're spending so much energy just trying to decode the sentences that you're not actually thinking about the ideas. You're in survival mode, not learning mode. If a book is too easy, your brain gets bored. There's no challenge, so there's nothing to hold your attention. You start skimming and your mind wanders, and you finish a chapter, but you couldn't tell someone what you just read. It's just like trying to lift a weight that's either too heavy, so you give up, or too light, so you're not building any strength. Your brain learns best in what psychologists call the flow state, that point where the challenge slightly exceeds your current ability. Not so hard that you're drowning, and not so easy that you're coasting. So here's what works. Choose stretch books, books that are about 10 to 20% outside your comfort zone. You should feel like you're working, but not like you're lost. If you've never read philosophy, don't start with dense text like Heidegger. I personally started with Meditations and also Letters from a Stoic and the Discourses of Epictetus. These books are accessible introductions to Stoic philosophy, and they gave me practical ideas I could actually apply in my life. Once you're comfortable with these, you can explore more challenging works. This is the Goldilocks zone. Not too hard, not too easy, but challenging enough that your brain stays engaged. So now you've got the right environment, the right engagement, and the right level of difficulty, but here's where most people still fail. And it's not because they're doing something wrong, it's because they're reading for the wrong reasons. You're reading books because you think you should. Someone recommended it, it's on a must-read list, or you're trying to hit a reading goal for the year. But you're not actually interested in it. And here's the thing. You can do everything else right. You can have perfect focus, you can take notes, choose the right difficulty level. But if you don't care about what you're reading, your brain won't retain it. Your brain is wired to pay attention to things that trigger intrinsic motivation, things you're genuinely curious about. When you're intrinsically motivated, your brain releases dopamine, which is not only what makes the experience more enjoyable, but also enhances memory consolidation. You literally retain more when you care. It's like forcing yourself to eat food that you don't like when you could be making something you actually enjoy. You'll finish it, but you won't actually savor it, and you definitely won't remember it. Here's what I'd suggest. Follow your genuine curiosity. Read books you actually want to read, not books you think you should read. And this doesn't mean only reading easy or fun books. It means reading books that genuinely interest you, even if they're challenging. I used to force myself through technical books I had zero interest in because I thought that's what productive people do. Once I gave myself permission to read psychology, philosophy, and business topics I was actually curious about, my retention improved dramatically. Stop guilting yourself into reading and start giving yourself permission to be curious. All right, so now you're focused, engaged, reading at the right level, and genuinely interested. At this point, you should be retaining everything, right? Not quite, because there's a difference between understanding something in the moment and actually remembering it later. You're taking notes while you read, maybe in a journal, maybe in an app. You're writing down quotes, summarizing chapters, and capturing the main points. And on the surface, this seems smart because you're being proactive. You're not just reading passively, you're documenting what you learn. But here's what's missing. You're just writing down what the book says. You're not connecting it to anything. And that matters because memory doesn't work by storing isolated facts. Memory works by building networks of connected ideas. This process is called elaboration. When you link new information to things you already know, you create durable memory networks that are much easier to recall later. If you just write down quotes or you summarize without connecting them to existing knowledge, they sit in your brain as isolated fragments. And isolated fragments get forgotten. It's like collecting puzzle pieces without ever trying to see the full picture. So here's what actually works. After each chapter, ask yourself 2 questions. How does this connect to what I already know? And how does this relate to something I've experienced? If I'm reading Meditations or Letters from a Stoic, and I come across an idea about controlling my reactions, like Epictetus says, it's not about what happens to you, but how you react that matters. I don't just write it down, I connect it to my own life. So it's like, this reminds me of when I get frustrated in traffic. I can't control other drivers, but I can control my response. Instead of laying on the horn and getting angry, I take a breath and focus on what I can control, my own actions. That connection makes the idea stick because it's no longer abstract. It's tied to something concrete in my experience. You're not just consuming information, you're integrating it into what you already know. Okay, so at this point, you've done everything right. You're focused, engaged, reading the right books, connecting ideas. But there's one more mistake, and it's the one that undermines all of this. You're trying to read as many books as possible. You've got a reading list goal, you're tracking your count, and you're rushing through books to hit your number. And every time you finish one, you immediately start the next. Here's what's wrong with that. Reading more books doesn't make you smarter. What creates understanding is consolidation and retrieval, reflecting on what you've read, discussing it, and recalling it over time. Speed reading might help you finish books faster, but it bypasses the very processes that create lasting comprehension. Research on memory shows that information needs time to consolidate. Your brain needs space to process, connect, and store what you've learned. If you immediately jump to the next book, that consolidation never happens. You're just shoveling information in without giving your brain time to do anything with it. It's like sprinting through a museum. You see everything but remember nothing. So what should you do? Just slow down. After you finish a chapter or a book, reflect on it. Discuss it with someone or rephrase the main ideas in your own words. It's about quality over quantity. I used to try to read 50 plus books a year and retained almost nothing. But now I shoot for 15 to 20 and I can actually tell you what I learned from each one. That's the difference. It's not about how much you consume, it's about how deeply you engage. Look, reading isn't about forcing yourself to finish books or hitting arbitrary goals. It's about building a process that actually works with your brain so what you read sticks and you can use it to grow. But knowing what to fix is only half the battle. If you struggle to make reading a habit, I made this video for you to watch next, where I share with you a simple step-by-step system to make reading automatic. Keep learning, keep growing, keep going, and I'll see you in the next one.